Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. Gonna do another nerd deep dive discussion into the Cosmere, which, as we were just saying before we started here, we're gonna talk about Mistborn Secret History, which is probably the most Cosmere world building heavy book in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, of course. And Secret History is when I was writing the description for this yesterday, I was saying it's hard to figure out how to classify or label it, because it's kind of a prequel, but it's kind of a sequel, because it's basically about the slave rebellion Mistborn leader with magic powers, Kelsier, who dies in the first Mistborn book. It's about him dying and going to the afterlife, and then basically manipulating events behind the scenes throughout book 2 and 3 of Mistborn Era 1, book 2 and 3, which are the Well of Ascension and the Heroes of Ages. And there's so much fascinating stuff that goes on. Like we learn more about what we learned some of in the third book, the Hero of Ages. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention it goes a little bit even into Era 2 also. Yeah, and we find out that Kelsier was this shadow that Vin thought it was basically like a bad guy chasing her, but he was actually trying to stop her from being manipulated by Ruin. And we learned in Hero of Ages that Ruin and Preservation are two opposing gods. Ruin is like the evil god, Preservation is the good god. And then like I said, there's so much fascinating stuff that we learn in this. Like, well, one of the things I forgot to mention, but that I was saying that I forgot after my first read of this, was that in the Cosmere there are dozens of planets, and there are a dozen different gods, and each god has their own planet, or no, I think each set of gods has multiple planets or something like that, and they're all in the different planets within the Cosmere. They're locked in this cosmic struggle with each other. And then like the biggest spoiler in Secret History, I would say, is that Ruin says something to Kelsier to the effect of, "Guess what? I planted this idea in your mind from the very beginning that you should start this rebellion to kill the Lord Ruler so you could release me from my prison." Yeah. So this is such a fascinating book that gets into, like I said, so much fascinating world building. And like we were talking about before we started this, so many interesting theological questions within a fantasy world too. So yeah, without rambling on too much, so let's start off with you, Tristram. So what is the kind of like the most appealing aspect of Mistborn Secret History to you?
I think, can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Because just my computer froze a bit, so I didn't know if I was still through. Yeah, so the thing that is amazing about Secret History is it's basically the only book I know of its kind where it's written almost like a behind the scenes of what has been happening in the book. Like, I've heard it called Mistborn 3.5 because it's like set after the third book kind of, but it's actually more of a behind the scenes of Mistborn. I think it's daring. I think it's really unusual. And I think one of the things I love the most about it is how it completes our understanding of how the Cosmere works. And Brandon basically lets us ask some pretty hard questions about stuff and says, here are my answers. You can take them or leave them, but this is what was actually going on. And a lot of times we feel that in books and we don't really get those answers. So it's really interesting to see an author kind of try and do that with his Deus Ex Machina like moments and going, actually, there's answers to these. Here they are. And it actually all fits in my system. You just don't know enough about it yet, which I thought was pretty cool, pretty interesting to look at.
Yeah, for sure. And there's so much that is revealed. And oh, sorry.
What happened?
I had the stream open to check the sound there, and I forgot to mute myself. Yeah, there's so much fascinating stuff that happens. It's so much interesting stuff to thinking about. And like one of the things I think is interesting too is I was rewatching Daniel Green's review of it, and he was one of the points he thought he made that I thought was interesting is that there's a lot of just straight up detailed exposition about the Cosmere. And you know, there's this rule that people talk about in writing: show, don't tell. But I think about, like, especially if you compare this to the Wheel of Time, for example, I think that the way Brandon Sanderson did this, just like putting all of the world building into, well, not all of it, but putting such an enormous chunk of the world building into one book and explaining it through a god, explaining it to a main character, really works really well, because it tells you all of these details that it, like you said, there's so many Deus Ex Machinas in the book too. Like, it reveals, oh, so that's why this happened this way, and this was this way the whole time. And so you understand what's going on. And the Cosmere is so enormous that it just like builds your appreciation of the Cosmere and Brandon Sanderson's world in that way. And like I said, like I was saying, in comparison to Wheel of Time, for example, it's an enormous world too. But because Robert Jordan does so much of the showing without telling, and it's such a complex universe, I find it like just confusing sometimes with all the stuff that's going on, because the more I read the books and reread them, the more I'm realizing that, oh, okay, so there are a million different perspectives in all the different books, and every single person is an unreliable narrator. I have to remind myself of that continuously. So it's easier to understand the way that Brandon Sanderson does it in the Cosmere, I think.
Did you just call him Branderson?
Yeah, I almost just called him Branderson.
Secret History. I'll say that the first time I read it, I probably understood less than half of what they were talking about in the book, because I read it right after the third book. So when they started going hardcore into like the metaphysics of the universe, I'm like, huh? Like, what the heck is going on? It's like, and they're talking about like Adonalsium and these shards and different vessels and yada yada yada. And then they're talking like random. He talks to like some random people just like sitting there that are like super knowledgeable. It's like, where the hell do these people come from? So once I got more into the Cosmere, and I'm pretty much completely up to date with it. Outside, I have not finished the White Sands graphic novels or the original source material. But after reading Stormlight, I think Stormlight also gives a pretty solid explanation, or at least incorporates a lot of these Cosmere metaphysics within the story. So I was better able to understand what was going on this time when I read it. I was like, okay, a lot of this stuff makes way more sense to me now. Because, in the Cosmere and specifically Stormlight, they really dig into Cosmere entities and events more so than they did here in Mistborn. I guess they deal a little bit more with it in Second Era, where Wayne has a direct relationship with Harmony, and it's an explicit direct relationship. But when we talk about Stormlight, it's a complete battle over those things. Whereas in Mistborn, even in Second Era, the workings of the gods is still very subtle. But in you have this direct intervention by the gods in Stormlight, and it's just thrust right in your face. And that's why I was able to understand Secret History so much more. As I've read it, this is probably the third time I've read it. And I remember even the second time reading it, I was like, I still don't quite understand what's going on here. But now I'm like, okay, I get it now. This all makes sense. You know, there are people that travel through the, what do they call it? The
cognitive realm.
Yeah, like I understand what the cognitive realm is. I understand.
Yeah. It
like
took listening to Legendarium podcast with them talking specifically about the detail of the Cosmere and the three different realms, and you know, like you said, reading other Brandon Sanderson work, particularly Stormlight Archive, where they bring some of the gods from the different planets to what is it? Is it Roshar in Stormlight Archive?
Roshar in Stormlight, scattered in here. And one of the things I would say is it's a little bit like someone who's never watched any Marvel movies, starting with What If, right?
Definitely.
Because What If is like a little behind the scenes kind of look at the multiverse ideas and where we can play with that. And if you don't have some kind of grounding in the or Loki, right? The Loki series, you try and watch that and you've just not watched anything else, you lose your brain. And but I think there's a lot of really interesting things we can talk about with Secret Histories. Did you want to go through it chronologically, or do you want to go through it by theme?
Oh, one thing I was going to say too is that this story, I wouldn't call it more of a prequel or sequel. It's basically a continuation of a point of view of a specific character after.
Yeah, it's a continuation. It's a continuation of the point of view of Kelsier, but it's like his perspective of the events that happen in the second two books of Era 1, The Well of Ascension, and
to be honest, imagine if this point of view was included in the trilogy. Like, it could have been. No. For sure.
It might have been confusing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It could have been confusing. Yeah. I wouldn't have got it, but I think technically it could be. It's just not as shocking or interesting if it was.
I think it detracts from the story as is, if it is, and having it broken up in all those different books would detract from this story, because this story leaps several years so that you can get Kelsier's experience. Because one of the things is that as he is a cognitive shadow now, he doesn't age. He's detached from time in a way that the physical isn't. And so at one point, he just sits trapped for a few years.
A whole year.
And so that's pretty boring if you can't just do a one paragraph time skip. And so I think Brandon definitely made the right choice in having this out. Also, this totally destroys, no, it doesn't totally destroy, but it massively changes the impact of Kelsier's death in the first book.
Yeah.
And if and Brandon said that was one of the reasons that he was he always knew he was going to do this, but he said that when he published it, it was kind of like taking a deep breath. And he's like, man, I'm going to get some absolute pasting for playing the resurrected dead guy trope. And but one of the things that's cool is he's saying, I had to establish what happens when you die in the Cosmere. And he does not pull any punches. He's like, this is what happens when you die in the Cosmere. And that is really cool to see someone go through almost on a mechanical level what happens to someone who dies in their world. And I thought that was really cool. Because
it's like how you were talking about how it gets into the metaphysics of the Cosmere, and like I was saying, this is like a theological book in the fantasy realm, and it doesn't do the kind of cheap trope of cheating, of someone cheating death, oh, you thought that character was dead? Well, you didn't see brain matter, did you? Turns out he's alive. It's not that sort of thing. It's he is dead, but this is what, like you were saying, this is what happens to someone when you die in the Cosmere, and it's him manipulating events in his kind of godlike presence in the, I think mostly in the cognitive realm. That's the one that he's manipulating the real world through, right? And what's the other realm other than the physical
That's
world?
The spiritual,
Yeah.
cognitive,
spiritual
and physical.
So
yeah.
Right.
The key concept, and this runs through all of his, is that the physical world is where things actually are occurring, but the cognitive realm is the idea of thought, right? Or how things are perceived. And so what's saying is that his body has died, but the concept of Kelsier and his spirit is still alive. Now, what should happen is he should let his consciousness go, and he should move on to the spiritual. But because he's Kelsier, right? He's just like, screw that, man.
Survive.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect too. How it makes even more sense in Secret History that people build this religion around Kelsier in the second two books, in the Wall of Ascension and Hero of Ages.
I wonder how much of an impact that has to him actually staying in the cognitive realm as opposed to the others. But that also makes me think too, like the Lord Ruler didn't last very long in the cognitive realm.
Yeah.
Well, he lasted longer than most, but he went away after a short time.
But it's clear,
Yeah.
like that's just something that I think is very important, is the nature of investiture. Now, we don't know loads about it yet, but basically investiture is the power. All power is investiture. Just like all energy is energy, right? It doesn't, it's just in different forms. So in Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, all power comes from investiture. And investiture is everywhere. It's in the human beings, it's in the planet, it's everywhere. And it comes from the 16 shards, which were formed from the original over-god or whatever Adonalsium was. We still don't fully know what Adonalsium was, but we know he was destroyed and split into six. He couldn't be destroyed. So when he was broken, he became 16 parts. 2 of those parts invested on this planet schedule. Those parts were God's preservation, God's desire to preserve, protect, and keep things as they are, to save them, if you will, and entropy. And some of my favorite bits in this book is at one point, Kelsier punches God in the face.
Yeah, that's so awesome.
But you see, I think Brandon is like genuinely saying, like allowing a bit of wish fulfillment, because there's a lot of us on this world who, believe in God or not, think, my goodness, if there is a God, when I get there, I'm going to freaking give that guy a piece of my mind. You know, he's, and that's what Kelsier does. It's like, I've had a crappy life. There's really gods? My goodness, you bastard. And he smacks him in the face. And I think a lot of people feel that I wish, you know, that I could do that. And so it's really cool that he gets to do that. And I think it's really a Kelsier-like move to just, instead of like the appropriate thing to do when you meet deity is surely like fall on your knees and worship them. But Kelsier never does what's appropriate. He tried to kill the Lord Ruler. He tried to steal the things that was impossible to steal. He won even after dying. There's always another secret. That's like Kelsier's trope, is that you can't really beat me because I refuse to be beaten. And so that's a really cool way of dynamic. And when Kelsier comes to this position, one, he is a Mistborn. So he's been invested his whole life, which gives him that little bit of extra time before he moves on. But then what he does is he does everything he can, including the exact opposite of what God tells him to do, to latch on to any investiture he can to keep him around. And in fact, that leads to him being trapped. The key thing that is interesting here, and this is the point I want to make, and I will stop talking, is that the Lord Ruler had held preservation momentarily, the power of the will at least. He definitely could have stayed longer if he had chosen to, but he doesn't want to. He is ready to go. He makes the
Yeah.
choice to go.
Well,
Kelsier,
he's been around long enough to kind of be
And-
tired with life.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And he's ready. And I think that's a really interesting perspective to look at our own lives. And I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon's met some people who, when death came for them, just weren't scared. They just said, you know what? I'm actually done. I'm actually tired and I'm ready to rest. I'm ready to go to what's next. Or if there is nothing next, I'm ready for that. I'm ready for peace. And then there's other people who are fighting tooth and nail, and they're like, if you come for me, death, I'm going to fight you with a shotgun, you know. And Kelsey is that guy. And I think it's cool that Brandon has shown us that there's more than one way to come to that moment. And remember, preservation loves the Lord Ruler.
Right.
Which is really interesting, because you call preservation the good guy and ruin the bad guy, but it's not quite that simple. Because preservation's like, I love it the way he didn't change, even though his empire was this awful empire that refused progress and was like killing people to stop it progressing. Like, it was terrible. And he's like, but I loved the fact he kept things the same. You're like, no, that's not good, preservation.
There's so much interesting stuff there too. Like you said, even when he's dead, he still won't do what he has to do, and then instead of just ascending to the cognitive and then the spiritual realm, this is so interesting in the metaphysics of the way that gods are in the Cosmere too. It's like Kelsier has more faith in preservation than preservation does in himself, because he's like, no, I'm not going to let ruin destroy you. I'm going to save you. And preservation's like, I can't do it. This is the way the realms work. This is the way the universe works. And Kelsier's like, no, I'm not accepting that. So he has more faith in preservation than preservation does in himself. And that's important what you mentioned there too, that it's not exactly as simple as that ruin is bad and preservation is good. It's that they're kind of similar to what we see in the Wheel of Time and many different fantasy and science fiction realms, and they take this from real world religions too. It's these opposing forces who are eternally locked in this cosmic struggle, but it's necessary to, and these binaries are essential to the existence of each other. One cannot exist without the other. And so Kelsier is helping preservation and then working behind the scenes to manipulate and try to communicate with his former companions in the real world to help save preservation from basically being killed by ruin, so that ruin can take over complete control of the world. And like you were saying too, in terms of the Cosmere going into Stormlight Archive, we see that same sort of process and theme too, like gods struggling against each other and using humans, and then humans helping gods to in this larger cosmic eternal struggle between different gods that are always fighting each other for control of the planets over which they rule. It's so much fascinating stuff going on.
And it's interesting too, like just thinking of the vessels themselves and how they were talking about, like, once you attain the mantle, like the personality of those vessels just kind of disappears.
Yeah, the power is so overwhelming.
Yeah, so one of the interesting things I thought too was we had a temporary ascension of Kelsier. And so far, from what we know, I don't know if there's any other characters that might have gone through this, but he's the only one who's gotten godlike knowledge and then descended back into a normal person. Is there another person that's done this before?
Yeah, there's a couple of people who've held the power of preservation on schedule. Schedule's the only example we have, but the Lord Ruler did it.
But he died. He's gone now.
Yeah, he's gone. And Vin did it, but she's dead. Yeah, he's the only one who's left. who's like an official sliver. And that's what we call it in the Cosmere. You're a sliver if you've held the power of a shard, but you don't anymore. But you're right, Dusty. There's an impact of doing that.
So when the Lord Ruler ascended, preservation still existed, though.
Yeah, and technically he didn't hold all of preservation. He held a sliver of it. He held what was in the Well of Ascension.
Okay, so what would be the difference between because we know when a vessel changes, this is basically what happened, right? So didn't preservation die, and then he held the power to give to Vin?
Yeah, but he couldn't hold it properly. One of the reasons
because he didn't have a physical body.
Yeah, and there's a second reason as well, which is preservation says to him, because he's like, preservation. It's like, oh no, like Ruin's going to get me. And he's like, just give it to me. And
he wasn't he wasn't a proper vessel.
Yeah, but it wasn't just like, it wasn't just a stupid reason though. It wasn't just like, sorry, it can only be one. He said, you're not connected enough to me. And one of the things he realizes later when he's got preservation's power and he's trying to fight Ruin is he realizes he's connected to Ruin. Because in his life, Kelsier did a lot more destroying than preserving. As a human, he wanted to save people, but he did it by destroying, by killing. And actually, that meant that he was just too opposed to preservation, really, to pick it up. The only reason he could take it at all is he cheated by using the orb that the Irie have. But Vin has always wanted to preserve. And Vin genuinely, like, she was trained by Kelsier, but she wasn't Kelsier. And she was able to truly hold the power. And the only thing that stopped her, of course, is that she had a bit of Ruin in her. But once that bit of Ruin is removed, she can. But Kelsier, it was him. Ruin's in him. The very way he lives is quite ruinous. And again, Ruin is not evil, but it's the opposite of preservation. And so preservation says to him, you might hold my power for a bit, but you can't really use it because it's not a power you understand. You'd be a bad holder of this power. And so that is one of the reasons Kelsier can't be the person forever. But Kelsier gets that. He knows as soon as Vin can have it, he's like, take it now. And then Vin can do what he cannot and sacrifice herself, because actually that's what's needed. The sacrifice play was needed. And guess what? Kelsier does not sacrifice himself. Not really.
No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well,
that's so interesting.
Survival is his main drive. So he's never gonna use.
He's the survivor. Yeah. Maybe
at the end of of Kelsier's story, we might see something like that. But then again, he kind of did when he fought the Lord Ruler a little bit.
A little bit.
And he was expecting to die, right? And create this religion.
Like, they had to take him the freak down. If he'd been able to get through that fight, he would have. Like, Kelsier goes with gnashing and wailing and teeth and knives. He doesn't go quietly. Like, you know when you see people get walked to the electric chair and they're like just walking calmly because they know it's hopeless. Kelsier would be like, "You got to drag me out of this cell. I'm going to take some skin off you suckers." He would not. He'd be taken, dragged, and kicking and screaming. It's just his nature. He rebels against everything. He will never do anything normal, and that's why he could survive when no one else can. He's crazy that way.
He himself says that he's crazy.
But just before we move off, like the opposition of Ruin and preservation, because I think Brandon does this extremely well. Preservation is like a shield. Okay, it's a perfect shield, and Ruin is like a sword, a perfect sword, and the shield can stop the sword, but it can never defeat it. And that's one of the things about preservation is it has no attacking weapons. And that is one of the reasons that preservation needed humans to do it for it. Because once you hold preservation for so long, Laras, who is the name of the vessel, he just held preservation too long. He couldn't even conceive of trying to destroy Ruin. Like, it was beyond him to do so. But Kelsier holding preservation tried to use it to fight because he's like, I can get that concept, but it wouldn't do so. When he struck Ruin, when Ruin was still Ruin, he hurt himself. He's like,
oh yeah, that's so interesting. And I don't remember whether I mentioned this before or after we started the stream, but it's so interesting too how the gods in this realm, like, or the forces like Ruin and Preservation, and we see this in Stormlight Archive too. It's not just this one conscious presence that remains the same throughout all time. It's more like a position, and you can become that god by killing that god, or you can eventually become that god if the position becomes available. So it's like the Ruin and Preservation, they're taking up these positions, and we see at the end of Hero of Ages that Vin, and I think it's Sazed, or Sazed takes up the position of preservation,
Sazed,
right?
Because Sazed's very different in a way, but you're absolutely right. That idea of you're not God, like the idea of God as being the ultimate perfect person who created everything and is everything, isn't really there, is it? Like what he's in this concept, the vessels are humans. We normal things, mortal creatures, but they have just got to a level of power, and they've held an entire shard of godhood, which has made them gods in effect. But that's so different from the way that we perceive, many modern day religions perceive God here on Earth. So God is not infallible, right? By definition. And so we can see here, God is clearly fallible. And what's worse, especially in Secret History, we can see that God is killable. And so whoa.
This is like an even more, like, way more expansive version of the theologian. I think he's a theologian, Alfred North Whitehead.
The vessel's killable, but the power is transferable.
Not, because energy cannot be destroyed. It can be transferred, but it cannot be destroyed. We believe in that as a rule of science, right? That you can convert energy, but in the end, matter itself doesn't cease to exist.
And it seems like the longer that a vessel holds the mantle, the longer they become the innate, like,
the power
value of that god.
And we see that with Laras. He can no longer remember concepts like trying to destroy anything. It's beyond his ability to even conceive. And we see it with Ati, who is the holder of Ruin, that like Ati isn't going to take over Scadrial. He's going to destroy it.
And he even says that once he destroys everything,
there'll be nothing.
Basically the preservation will become dominant because there's nothing left to destroy.
Actually, I'm glad you guys brought that up, because I was gonna ask you guys. I think it would be interesting to compare and contrast, like, the way we see these different gods in Scadrial versus what's the Mistborn one? No, that's the Mistborn one. What's the Roshar in comparison to Roshar? Because I've only read the Stormlight Archive books once, and it's so interesting, the similarities and differences between how they go into this in the Stormlight Archive and how they bring back basically characters like Kelsier without naming them necessarily. Like, there's still Ruin and Preservation, so one of them has to be Sazed, but it's so detailed, it's hard to keep track of because I've only read the Stormlight Archive once so far.
Yeah. And like, one of the things that's like amazing to me is that, like, I love the way Brandon describes them. And one of the things I like in this book is there is a section where because Preservation's dying, he's literally falling to pieces, as we speak. And so it's like, it's a little, well, not embarrassing is the wrong word.
Well, one of the things we do find out, though, and I just didn't get the concept here in Secret History because it's not explained very well, But one of the things you get to find out when reading on in the Cosmere, especially when you get to Stormlight, and how important it is for these gods to keep their contracts. Like if they do not, if they go outside of their contract, that basically spells death for that god. And it's explained more in the Stormlight archive. But when I first read Secret History, I was like, this guy's dying because of some promise he didn't keep? That's kind of weird.
The thing is that, like, do you know, like, that's quite a concept that is quite strong here in many religions as well. Like, for example, in my own faith, the concept is that God cannot go against his own word. That, like, if he did, he would cease to be God. Okay? That concept of law and order. And so, like, often I think of that as a reason why God doesn't do certain things, because actually I believe that he believes in free will and he's guaranteed it to humankind. So could he take that away? Well, yes, but if he did, he wouldn't be God. Yeah, because he's actually gone against his own word, which makes him imperfect. And so
that's interesting. That's an interesting theme. How even God has rules that he has to follow, and we see with preservation, and I guess you could say with ruin also in Secret History, how they cannot leave these realms. They're almost like imprisoned by their status of rulership.
Yeah, and by their deals, right? Preservation and Ruin made a deal, and Preservation uses it to trap Ruin, but not forever. And they make a deal, we'll make life, right? I need change to make humans. Humans will not exist with just Preservation. But Preservation puts in a bit more than Ruin does, more of his power. And Ruin's like, that's fine, because that means I'll win in the end. And Preservation's like, that's okay if you'll let us create at all. And Ruin's like, okay, we'll create a world. It'll last for a while, but eventually I get to destroy it, right? And Preservation's like, sure you do. And then Preservation tried to cheat on the deal by like, no, I can't really let you kill it. And Ruin's like, yeah, but I have to. And so then that's what the whole story is about. But I love the fact that Ruin can't just say, I'm going to ruin until it's not useful for me. Then I'm going to stop. No, he must continue entropy. Eventually the cliff must wear away. Eventually the man must age. Eventually the food must decay. And he cannot just turn that off. And Preservation can't turn off his preservation when it suits him. Well, now I'm not going to preserve. Now I'm going to kill you because you're my bad guy. And then I'll go back to preserving. He literally cannot go against his theme. And like Centrist was saying, eventually the power becomes so strong it just completely overwhelms them. So the power is much bigger than they are, and it overwhelms. And one of the coolest quotes of this book, I wish I had it to hand. I'll try and find it. But at one point, like, Laros is falling to pieces, and like Kelsier is calling him Fuzz.
Part of his crew.
But yeah, and I guess that's why he protects him. By saying that, it's a bit disrespectful, but it also shows I consider you one of my people now, so I'm going to keep you alive. But when he's beginning to think of Fuzz as like, and then he like tries to shake him at one point, and he looks in his eyes, and then he's like, oh, you are a god, and he sees the depth. And the way that Brandon describes it is so amazingly good. It's like he uses all the things that are eternal and never end and just will not move. And he's just like, he saw all of this in like the soul. And when it's, I think it's in Hero of Ages that like Ruin is described. Someone looks into Ruin and is like, oh, he isn't just a nasty guy. He's not just like the bad emperor. He is the very meaning of decay. He is the waves that beat constantly on the cliff and will eventually destroy it in 1,000 years. He's not like a murderer. He's that. He's constant change. He's that thing that wears you down. He is friction. And you're like, oh, I can't really be mad at friction. And like, like Thanos, I am inevitable. Ruin truly is inevitable, and he can't be destroyed. He is necessary.
Right.
Yeah, totally. It's so it's interesting too. It's interesting too that, like you mentioned, the Fuzz is like the physical manifestation of preservation, it's interesting too, like there's that one part when Kelsier is communicating with those other two people in the cognitive realm, and he thinks during that part, because he's trying to get the fuzz to communicate with him during that part, but he can't get him to do so, but he thinks that he's still watching. And then we see after, when he can communicate with him physically, it seems like the preservation is always conscious of what is happening, because there are little bits of it everywhere, because it's like this cosmic force, but it doesn't necessarily always have the power to physically manifest itself even in the cognitive realm. It doesn't always have that complete power. I think that's really interesting too.
Agreed.
So were you about to just say something there, Dusty?
No. I like that these gods have flaws, and I think that makes it much more interesting. As you know, these pieces of chess that move world events in these worlds. Because a lot of this book just makes me think so much more of the Stormlight, which is really interesting. And since this is I haven't read Era 2 a second time. I'm hoping that like the stuff here that I've read in Secret History really sticks with me and makes me analyze Era 2 a little bit more differently.
Well, can we talk a little bit about Sazed, because that leads us to
Era 2. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So at the end of this sequence, Kelsier is watching all this happen. He's constantly interfering on Earth, and I think the religion doesn't make him last. I think him lasting makes the religion last, because he keeps interfering. So people keep seeing manifestations of God. So like, it must be God, right? He must be real, because otherwise, why does he keep interfering and answering my prayers? It's like, oh, Kelsier is a real thing. I literally saw him. Okay, I believe. But at the very end, Kelsier allows, through his incredibly clever ingenuity, because Ruin beats him again and again. He tricks him and defeats him. And Kelsier's like, at one point, he gets to talk to Spook while Ruin is looking the other way. That's another interesting thing. Gods are super powerful, but they are not as aware of everywhere at the same time. Like Brandon makes that clear, that his gods cannot be aware of everything. I mean, they are, but they're not looking. Like, we have peripheral vision, but we're not fully focused on it. It's clear that gods are like that as well. And so when Kelsier goes through the cognitive realm to where Luthadel is, that's where all of Ruin's focus is, right on Vin and Elend. And he's going, oh crap, if I try anything here, Ruin's just going to stop me. So he goes to Fadrex and finds Spook. And like, Spook's, Ruin's giving him a bit of attention, but not really. He's not Vin. So Ruin's not focusing. And so he gets to talk to Spook, gives him the message, and he's like, Spook, anyone pierced by metal is like, don't trust them. So Spook puts it on a piece of metal and sends that messenger to Vin. And Ruin's like, you think you can do that? He's like, Marsh, go kill him. Marsh kills him, but Marsh reads the message to Ruin, reads it out loud. But then it's because Marsh reads that message that when Marsh then gets his tiny bit of freedom, when they throw all their power against him, which he does, he distracts Ruin. He can't beat Ruin, but he does something that preservation couldn't do, which is just chuck everything at Ruin anyway, even knowing it's pointless. And Ruin gets distracted, and in that moment, Marsh has the chance to make a free choice. He does make that free choice, and all he does is take out her earring. And so it's so cool to think that's what was going on behind the scenes. That's what was happening. Kelsier allowed that moment to occur. We've seen that moment occur already in the books. Now we know that Kelsier was fighting to make that possible. And then, of course, Vin can win the fight, sacrifice herself, put the world to rights, kind of. Well, not really. And then she dies, and the powers both become available. And at that point, Sazed comes and picks them up. And Sazed is the right person, because Kelsier could have taken Ruin. What would have happened if he had? But And like Kelsier's like, why don't you guys like want to live to like Elend and Vin? And Elend and Vin don't want to go back. Now, I just want to say, we've talked about the death thing. Like Kelsier's like, I'm hanging on tooth and nail. The Lord Ruler is, I'm just tired of life. Vin and Elend are genuinely happy to proceed to the spiritual realm. They are content. They could stay. It's clear that they could try and stay, but they choose not to. And I think Brandon's showing us that there are people who are genuinely in this position where if there is a God and if there is an afterlife, that they are ready and willing to meet it. And that you can have people who can be at peace with that, rightly or wrongly. But anyway, harmony. Why is Sazed the perfect holder? Sazed has what's called copper mines, which are the memories. And one of the things that he's the specialist in is he has all the copper mines of all the religions that have ever existed in the world. And through that, he has the knowledge to use the power of God, but he also has the understanding to bring ruin and preservation together. And what he realizes is, yes, they are opposites, but they don't have to necessarily destroy each other. They can be two sides of the same coin. And then he brings them together. And this makes him, for those of us who are Cosmere aware, the most powerful being currently in existence. Because he is the only being to hold two shards. And Brandon said in one of his Ask Me Anythings that one of the other gods who's really dangerous, who's actually been killing other gods, Odium, which is a shard, he's afraid of him. He's afraid of him because he actually has two shards. And that doesn't take great maths to figure out. Like, he's seriously powerful. Now, the reason I brought him up, though, is because of what Dusty said about Era 2. Because in Era 2, Harmony, he has the power that Ruin has, which is to speak to people. He has the power that Preservation has, which is to hear people's thoughts. But one of the things that Harmony sometimes complains about, because he speaks quite directly to Wax, the main character, and one of the things he complains about is that he stops himself sometimes.
Like he's basically the god of balance at this point. So
yeah, the god of balance between ruin and preservation. That's really interesting.
So if he tries to save too many people, that goes against who he is. And if he tries to destroy his enemies, that goes against who he is. So he's got to balance, and he does that by providing as much free will as possible. But he still wants to be an influence. And I love one point in one of the books, Wax is like, why didn't you like send any help to these people? He's like, I sent you, didn't I? He's like,
yeah. He's like, that's interesting too. Like it goes back to how the gods they have like this peripheral vision, as you said. They're not necessarily seeing everything at once, and they don't necessarily have complete power all the time too. Like sometimes they can't manipulate events as much as they want to, so they have to do it in this indirect way, or they're constrained by their own rules that they created for themselves, as you mentioned too. So they can't manipulate events as much as they want to. So that's the reason that they have to go about it in this indirect way. And that's an interesting thing too, in terms of Sazed and Harmony, with what you said in comparison to Odium in Stormlight Archive. I keep going back to that because this contrasting these similarities and differences in my head along with Era 2 just helps it make more sense in my mind in terms of the details of the Cosmere.
Yeah, and actually even the nature of the books, right? Because in Mistborn, it's all about, can I save them or will they be destroyed? In Roshar, because they're different shards, it's more about honor versus emotion. Okay? So like random raw emotion or honor and rules and lawfulness. So if you do a D&D at all, the idea of chaos versus law, that concept. And it's really interesting because
isn't there a third shard?
I was just going there. There's a third god on Roshar called cultivation.
Right.
And cultivation believes in letting things grow and then shaping their root by cutting away when necessary and feeding when necessary. And so she has a very different perspective than both honor and odium. And so it's really interesting that instead of being 1 versus 1, it's 1 versus 1 versus 1. And it's like, how will that eventually play out is really, really interesting. And we'll do Stormlight another time.
Yeah, we still don't know like what happened to Honor either. It's like
we know
there's no vessel.
Well, the power, he was killed. The vessel was killed. And the
power, but nobody holds the power. It's just kind of out there, I guess.
Odium believed he had shattered the power, because you can't destroy it, but you can shatter it.
So he got like dispersed.
Yeah, but one of the problems is for Odium is that now it seems that there might be some people who are capable of maybe holding it. And there was
you mean by like the radiance or something like that? The re-emergence of them.
Yes, because the Spren are all little bits of honor. All of them are. And but one of the things is that Dalinar in particular is a character in Stormlight Archive, and there is a moment at which Dalinar was able to hold a certain level of honor that hadn't been held previously. And,
Unite!
Yeah. And when he does that, Odium says, "No, I killed you." That's what he says. So he obviously saw in Dalinar in that moment something that was reminded him of his old adversary. And like Andrew mentioned, honor isn't so much the man as the power, and the power still exists. And so there's always a risk. In a different world, a world that we haven't really gone into, there's where the gods Dominion and Devotion lived. Odium destroyed them, killed the vessels, but he couldn't kill the power, so he stuffed it in the cognitive realm. And he did that deliberately.
What world is that?
That's Cell.
Okay, and what stories happen on that world?
Is that Elantris?
That's Elantris and the Emperor's and the Emperor's Soul.
Okay.
So that's the form-based magic. And but the cool thing is that he stuffed it all in the cognitive realm because he said if he didn't, it would collect. And that's what it does in Scadrial, you see. It collects at the will of ascension. Eventually, the energy wants to be whole. Eventually it will collect, and eventually someone will pick it up. And if someone picks it up, you know what they say about the One Ring in
so Stormlight is basically Honor's essence, I guess.
Well, it's all three. You mean Stormlight itself?
Like Stormlight.
Yes. Yeah. That is, like the mists are preservation.
Right.
And Atium is literally Ruin's physical form. Like that's it, right? So basically, the Stormlight as we know it is honor light. Okay. Now we also know though that there are other kinds of light. So we know there's void light. Okay.
Right.
And we believe that there's a cultivation light. We just haven't found it yet.
Yeah, wasn't it that weird light that they made that might possibly be it, but we don't really know?
Well, no, they made a version of light that it was.
It's like a unity of the two.
Yeah, and it was capable of destroying.
Okay.
Indestroyable people, but we don't want to get into Rhythm of War here, dudes, because we could talk.
Yeah, it'll be pretty complicated.
Can I just touch on one other thing before we go?
Yeah.
Too far? It's there's another really cool thing in this is they really emphasizes world hoppers.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So the concept is they don't have space travel yet. None of the worlds are currently advanced enough to physically get in a spaceship and fly to a different planet. But the physical, people have learned to move from the physical using investiture to the cognitive. And the cognitive is a realm of ideas. So it isn't bound by some of the same rules as the physical. So in the cognitive realm, you can travel between planets without the need for spaceships. And so there are people.
It's like going and Tel'aran'rhiod in the flesh.
Yes, absolutely. And then you can pop out in the flesh somewhere else. And that is traveling, in fact. female traveling in Wheel of Time, that's exactly what they do. They're going through the Telar and Riyadh and appearing at the other side. So yeah, that's the concept. And so he meets people in the cognitive realm. And I think there might be some people who might listen to this podcast who are not like Brandon Sanderson geeks, who may not understand. But he meets two people at a camp, Chris and Naz. And just for those of you who aren't aware, without going into it too deeply, Chris is a Cosmere scientist from Caldera, which is the world of white sand. She is traveling through the cognitive realm, gathering all the information she can about all the worlds of Cosmere and their magic systems. And she is writing that down. The Ars Arcanum that is at the end of each book is written by her in character. That is an
Oh,
that is her. That is her textbook on the Cosmere and its magic and how it all works. The maps and the drawings that are in the books that are actual real world artifacts are done by Naz, her assistant. And sometimes he even annotates them and puts comments on. And that's because he has been sent by Chris to figure out what's going on in these places and what key events are taking place so that she can keep track of it all for her magnum opus. And so the fact that they turned up as actual characters, met Kelsier, interacted with him, suggests that maybe in the later books we might see them be forefront characters who actually in the final sequences where she brings all her knowledge together and interferes in the world. And hopefully things like Secret History will give us a basis for her character.
So you think she's in the pull of Aaron or something?
Not a Varen. I freaking hope there can be only one Varen. But I think, Dusty, we might find out that in the end she is the main character.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that could totally be the case. Like similar to how Sazed was the one who became preservation at the end of Era 1 of Mistborn.
Who was that first guy that Kelsier met that was floating on the spirit log?
Hoyd.
Okay, I was wondering.
Yeah.
I was like, is this? Oh, yeah, that's right, because of the insult trading. I was like, okay. Yeah, there you go. The insults. And yeah, it has to be him.
But actually, yeah, let's do, Hoyd is like Brandon's, he is Brandon's main character. He is like so he's in everything. He's constantly just messing around. But there's a couple of pieces of detail that we got in here about Hoyd. The one, we know that Hoyd can't hurt people, but also that he can't be hurt. We're not quite sure how or why exactly. But like at one point, he's talking to someone with a shard blade, and he's like, yeah, if you want to stab me with that toy, you can go right ahead. It's not going to do anything to me. And we're like, what? Because at that point, like shard blade's like the best weapons we've ever heard of. We're like, how can that not hurt you? Why aren't you afraid? And even though at one point he's got a sword on him, he like makes a comment about how he can't do anything with it. Like he can't hurt anybody, not even a fly. Like he's vegan because he can't eat anything that might have hurt anything. Like that's like, we don't know fully why not, but we know that's the case. But Kelsier punches him.
Yeah.
And Hoyd's
for
like,
insulting him.
And Hoyd's like, you're not alive. I can punch you. And so Hoyd's like the sheer delight. I can hurt somebody. Yay. So he goes to town on him and he tells him he's not really being hurt. He only thinks he's being hurt. So as long as he doesn't think he's being hurt, this won't hurt. But of course, Kelsier was human just a short while ago. So when someone's like battering him, he thinks he's being hurt, so he feels pain. And
are you talking about the Drifter guy or the? Okay.
Hoyd is the Drifter.
Oh, he's the Drifter. Okay. Because there were two times he met him.
Yeah, because you see him going in and you see him coming out.
Okay.
And when he's coming out, he asks Loras, the holder of preservation. He goes like, "Who is that freaking guy? I hate that guy." And Loras is like, he calls him Cephandrius. and we know that's Hoid's true name. So it's definitely Hoid.
Oh,
But one of the things, why did Hoid turn up? Hoid turns up for a very specific reason, and now we know why. He picks up a bead of Lerasium, which is the god metal of preservation. Like atium is the god metal of ruin. And we know that what Lerasium does, if you burn it, is it makes you Mistborn. It gives you all the powers.
Oh, I didn't even realize that atium is the god metal of ruin.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, because ruin's name is Ati. So atium. Right?
Oh, okay.
Preservation's name is Leras. So
the bead that was given that Ellen got, that was the body of Leras.
Preservation, and that's why it gave him all Allomancy powers, full Mistborn.
So what's preservation's god metal then?
Lerasium.
Oh,
it's the one that Ellen ate to become Mistborn.
Oh, okay.
And apparently you don't have to be, I guess you just don't have to be any type of...
Yeah, you don't even have to be a Mystic.
No, because that bead makes you all those things. It is pure god metal. And so what it does is, you see, the thing is, it makes sense, doesn't it? That the god metal lets you use all his powers.
Mm-hmm.
It's the unlock. But one of the things that's interesting, by the way, is that all of the gods have a god metal. So Honor will have a god metal, and so will Odium, etc., etc., etc. But anyway,
well, why does he say that there's 16 medals?
There are 16. There are 16 medals that are to Scadrial. Okay, so 4, 4, and 4. We don't have them all, but in Era 2, we find out some more of them. So, they discover more as their metallurgy gets better. They discover more metals. They can make more alloys. But we know the 16 is the key. But guess what? Again, guys, don't want to go too far with the lore. But each of the god metals can potentially make 16 submetals each.
Holy shit! Wow.
So basically,
so the Scadrial metals, are they submetals of Lerasium?
Yeah. That's the idea.
Holy shit. 16 submetals of one god metal.
Correct.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, he's not going there. But I think what he's doing is he's leaving himself wiggle room. But the cool thing for me is, right, that's so cleverly thought out. And the concept of it is so clever. So, Hoid, Sifandrius, he's turned up. He's nicked in. He's got the physical realm. He's picked up a bead of Lerasium, and he's nicked out again. So guess what? He's now a full Allomancer. He's got full access to all the powers of this world. But what else do we know about him? We also know that on Roshar, after a character died that had a spren, that he picked up that character's spren. We know that happened. So we know that he's also a Lightweaver on Roshar. And we know he comes from a different planet himself, and we know he got powers from there. So it's like Hoid's going around getting all the different magic systems, so that he can so that he can have it all. He's not just going to have one of the powers; he's going to have all of the powers.
He's going to have like all of the powers on all of the different planets. Oh, that's so cool.
I know he showed up in Warbreaker. I don't know.
Yep, he did.
He did?
Yeah, he tells
who is he in Warbreaker?
The storyteller.
Oh, okay. Could you refresh my memory on that?
It's a tiny scene, Andrew.
Okay.
In the Court of Gods, they ask a storyteller to tell the original story, and a storyteller comes in. He is called Hoid, and he tells the story to Lightsong. So that is Hoid.
Is the Hoid in Mistborn really Hoid, or is it somebody else named Hoid?
It is Hoid as well.
So it's the guy that's like posing as a vagabond.
Yes, and he loves posing as a vagabond. He poses as a vagabond frequently. In Mistborn Era 2, at one point, Waxillium gets a new coachman, and he's called Hoid. And
wow.
And Hoid gives him an earring. He's an interesting guy.
Wow.
He's constantly just doing little bits here and there, tweaking a little here, tweaking a little, but in Roshar,
that's why it's so fun. That's why it's so fun to reread like Brandon Sanderson books endlessly, because you notice more and more of the Cosmere every time.
Yeah, and he's becoming more front and center with it, isn't he? As we
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah,
But,
definitely with
in the first
Stormlight.
books, it was really tricky to even figure out who Hoyd was. But we get increasingly interesting stuff. And this book, for me, it was when I read this book that the wrapping paper all came off, and I was like, "Oh, this is what it's about."
Yeah.
And we learned so much about realistic theory, because like even things like at one point, Kelsier has to run basically halfway to another planet, and in the cognitive realm. And as he's running, he realizes that if he doesn't think about it, he can run forever. But the moment he thinks about how far he's run, he is exhausted.
Yeah, but he still doesn't seem to need to drink water. He was noticing too, but he just does because he likes it. And it's interesting because it talks about how, and I think it gets into this a bit with other similar types of experience, and like gods like rune and preservation, even a little bit perhaps, that they want to hold on to these ways that remind them of what it feels like to be human, which is such an interesting characteristic to see in gods. And we see some of that in Warbreaker too, which you mentioned.
Agreed. And
one of the questions I have, when he was running off planet?
He was almost off planet. He says that he starts to get further and further away from preservation because he feels it. And we know that the Eyrie created their base in between worlds. So, their fortress is probably in between the cognitive realm of Cell and the cognitive realm of Scadrial.
Oh, okay.
But it's out there. It's beyond what is normal, and he knows he can feel Scadrial getting dimmer. So we don't know exactly where he was, but he moved away from the center to the periphery.
Yeah, that was probably the part of the book that was the most murky for me. I was just like, where is this area he's at?
It's meant to be. It's meant to be, because he doesn't want to give us too much, because then he has to hold himself to it, right? I mean, Brandon, in a meta sense. But the Eyrie are clearly from Cell. They use the Cell swear words. And
wait, what were the words they're using? Because I completely forgot.
They say things like "masterful domi" and things like that, which is like totally Cell swearing. And and their names are all aeons.
Oh.
Like Ire is an aeon. IR.
Right.
And so they're almost definitely from Cell.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
The book you didn't finish, Andrew. Go finish it.
Yeah, it got too boring for me. If we do a book chat on it on my channel though, if you guys want to, I would read the whole thing.
We can summarize it for you.
Because it seems like we're going to, and I'm sure you guys are okay with this, eventually go through like basically the entire Cosmere on, well, like probably through both of our channels. Because I think I don't know if you remember this, Dusty, but I suggested a while ago that we go through Stormlight Archive, like a deeper dive on your channel, like we've been doing with the Wheel of Time books, because I know you guys like those ones more than I do, and Mistborn is my favorite Brandon Sanderson series, and I totally want to explore. I think I do want to explore like the entire Cosmere eventually too, because I'm so attached to nerding out on every detail now.
And we have to do Era 2 on this channel, man. We have to.
Definitely. Yeah.
I love Era 2. I was slow burned with Era 2. Like at first I'm like, hey, this isn't Era 1. Where's my swords? And then it won me over. It just really won me over. And I just now I can't wait to read it. Like when I get back to it, like I just reread all 4 books because book 5 is coming out. And
right.
So I to get myself back in the mood, and I was just like, my goodness, I love this stuff. I love how quirky Wayne is. I love character Wax. I love Wax's romance. I think it's the best romance in the Cosmere. Just freaking love it.
Oh, interesting.
I'll say this: Era 2 definitely made Michael Kramer work for his money.
Did he?
Yeah, because he had to do
Wayne's
so
voice
many
is the
different.
best.
Yeah, he had to do so many different like Wayne voices because he's always like pretending to be other people and having other accents. So you hear Michael Kramer's like doing like 100 different accents for Wayne, or like, man, bravo. That's what a voice actor should be.
Michael Kramer holds, whatever the power is of like voice acting. He has that shard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's one thing I forgot to mention too, just as a little thing. The first time I read Secret History, I read it as an ebook. And then I wanted to I like to do this when I reread books. I wanted to experience it in a different format. So I listened to the audio.
Oh, he did some of the voices different. Did you notice that?
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed that. And I thought that I don't know if it was because I had read it before or some combination of that and experiencing in the different format, but I think I got more out of it listening to it in audiobook format than I did when I read it in ebook format. But like we were talking about, there's so much complex stuff that happens in this book that I don't know how much of that is due to it just having been the first time that I read it too.
There's so much in it. There's so much in it. And like one of the other things we haven't discussed at all, right, is like Brandon puts a remarkable amount of art into his books. Like more than, I don't know, any other person I read. I'm just saying that. Like of all the people I read, he puts more artwork in his books than any of them. And so, for example, in this book, we get the solar system maps, which is pretty cool. And so, like, you can see things like on the Taldane one, where it literally shows...
I need to get myself a hard copy of this one.
Well, you can
me too.
You can get the pictures just off the wiki because, like, he's not like... Brandon's great about not, like, gating his stuff. Like, he's very generous about it. Like, you can get Warbreaker for free if you sign up to his newsletter. Like, that's who this guy is. He's made
a lot of his books have a lot of, like... illustrations mainly about the magic systems.
Yeah, but sorry, go on, Dustin.
No, I was gonna say just like something like the Rhythmatus. You look in there, and it shows you like all the different magic circles and formations for that magic system.
Absolutely.
Oh, cool.
Same thing for
I only listened to that one as an audiobook. I should check out that physical one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, Elantris also has like a ton of different aeons in it.
It does.
Okay.
And like even things like in the Wheel of in the Roshar books, like the archways with like the pictures, it shows like you can tell by which picture is on the beginning of the chapter which heralds are going to be thematically involved in that chapter. Very cool.
Oh,
there's
cool.
Loads of little stuff like that. But the thing is, if you never read Mistborn Era 2, like in a physical form?
No, I listen to them as audiobooks. Yeah.
Well, then even if you just do it on the internet, right? There are broadsheets that are in between each part that are like a double pager, like newspaper, right? And they are brilliant. They're amazing.
Oh, nice.
World building. Like he has this bit where it's like an ad from these coachmen saying why you shouldn't use motor cars, and the ad from the motor car people saying why coachmen are rubbish and horses poo all over the place. And just showing the evolution. And Allomancer Jack, who is a gentleman adventurer, don't you know, he's like a tin eye, and he keeps talking about all these crazy adventures he goes on, and he's clearly an absolute prat. But he has this terraceman who works for him that he like talks about as if he's his stupid stooge, but clearly the terraceman's like pulling him out of all sorts of crap rubbish. He's just hilarious. I absolutely love the broadsheets. They're so good. Anyway, and
I should definitely check those out.
Yeah, there's like little Cosmere hints in there as well. Like Chris and Naz put an application in one to see if anyone's noticed, like Kelsier doing anything. It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And again, just doesn't. It just adds flavor, right? Or in the Roshar ones, there's actual pictures of Shallan's sketchbook, like the things that she's drawing. And in this book, there are solar system charts. So it shows all the planets in their solar system. And in Roshar, for example, that's particularly interesting because they came from a different planet in the solar system. And potentially the Tranquiline Halls that they're calling heaven might be a different planet in their solar system. And, that whole concept. And so it's like really cool to see the different solar systems and how they work. And,
so I think they got there via perpendicularity or something like that.
Yes, that they came through the cognitive realm. But they have a myth that they were driven from the Tranquiline Halls, and one day they will go back and reclaim it in battle, like Valhalla. And it's interesting, though, that for them it's not some spiritual realm; it's actually a planet. And they talk about the place where the heralds go as a place of like desolation and constant pain. That seems to be a real place as well. And
like
also,
a hell.
But
they kind of talk about it being kind of like a planet. Like they kind of elaborate a bit more about it as it's a physical planet of some sort.
Correct.
And Rhythm of War.
So absolutely. So here's the thing: what about when they get freaking spaceships?
Mistborn Era 3.
That's another thing that's so interesting about Mistborn itself too, because there's going to be 3 eras, and then the first one is a fantasy era, and then with the progression of history in the second one, it's like fantasy western, which I know some people don't like as much, and I get that, but I like that it's different in that way. Like they're like with the slow time effect. They're like Matrix slow motion gunfights, which is totally cool, and like the tropes of robbing trains and stuff like that. And then, like you were saying, the third one, Era 3, is probably going to be science fiction. It's so interesting.
It's weird though too. Like, don't all of the Era 2 books have their own like unique flavor? I think. Like, I think the first one is very Western. And then when you get to Bands of Mourning, it's very Indiana Jones like.
That's
like
true. It
kind of abandons that Western feel, more of like a adventure type of, Indiana Jones type adventure where they're raiding like ruins and stuff like that.
Yeah. And book 2 is like a hunt for a murderer, right? It's like, oh, there's a killer among us. How can we find her? It's like a political thriller.
I like the different flavors that he has for Era 2. It makes it really interesting.
But no, just to be clear, there was going to be 3 eras of Mistborn. There'll now be 4 because Wax and Wayne kind of happened by accident. Brandon Sanderson, the only person who can write a 4-book series by accident. But the third one will be what was going to be the second one, which is, I believe, going to be like a 60s, 70s, like detective series. So he's going to set it with like 60s, 70s era technology. But again, like he's done in every era, he's going to have them take a technological jump during the books. So I imagine I think they're going to be discovering space race, right?
Oh, cool.
Like the moon landing kind of era of the very beginning of rockets. But at the same time having like a detective series going on the planet.
There should be some sort of like there should be some sort of crossover with the Dresden Files at some point, Dusty. How cool would that be?
Well, I know one thing that Harmony has said is they're supposed to be far more advanced than they actually are. Like they've been held back. Yeah.
And he blames himself for that. He's like, I made it way too easy for you, and you actually need conflict to grow. But guess what? Conflict just kicked off in the Wax and Wayne books. And guess what it's done? It's accelerated technology like crazy. And they've discovered airships now. They're not going backwards, are they? And
it's airships. They got those now.
And then in the next era, after the detective era in like the 60s, 70s, he's going to go way forward and do full-on sci-fi.
Sweet.
It's going and the running theme will be the magic systems. The magic systems of Hemalurgy and all exist.
Oh, sweet. Have you read Brandon Sanderson's YA science fiction book
I have
Starsight
read
and
everything that the man has ever written.
I haven't read those yet.
Oh yeah, I totally want to read those at some point for sure. Do you think he's as good at?
I can get them to you.
Oh sweet. Do you think he's as good at science fiction as he is at fantasy, Tristram? Yeah.
I like fantasy more, but I just think the guy's the god of writing. I like he cannot do anything and disappoint me. It seems but maybe I'm easy to please. But have you ever read The Emperor's Soul?
Yeah, I read it.
Yeah, I did read that.
I think that is the best short story I've ever read, and I think I could argue that very competently. I think as a self-contained short story in fantasy setting, I think it is the best short story I've ever read. Wow. Of all short stories I've read by any author ever, it is. I think that is la pièce de résistance. And
yeah, it's definitely better than Well of Souls.
Maybe we should do a book club chat on Arcanum Unbounded, because that's the collection that you sent me of that, Dusty. That's the place where I read Secret History this time, and you talking about Emperor's Soul, Tristram, made me think about how much I love that story. My favorite story by Brandon Sanderson that I've ever read that I can think of is that one, Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell, where that woman is going through that place where she has to like kill these demons, but she can't let a drop of blood spill on the earth. Oh, that's so interesting.
I think they can't be loud. There's like a bunch of little rules that they got to follow.
There's 3. But by the way, like we'll get into this later, but like Nas, who I mentioned, is like the guy who does the maps. He's from her planet. He's from Threnody, and in one of the Allomancer Jack broadsheets, there's like a story about Allomancer Jack's girl, and she gets shot at by Nas because he's trying to steal something, a map that she's like, hey, you can't take that, and he shoots at her, and he has a gun that shoots wraiths.
Oh wow.
We don't know how yet, but that's freaking awesome. Like, you know those shadows? Like, imagine you have a gun that shoots those suckers. What can't you beat with that? You know,
it's like a heat-seeking missile.
And and like, by the way, we know that a shard was killed near Threnody, and so we one of the rumors amongst the Cosmerites is that maybe one of the reasons that Threnody is so messed up is because a shard was killed there. But we don't know that. That's speculation.
Oh, okay.
But would be cool to find out when it all gets revealed. But yeah, that's a great book. That's a great book. Short story. He wrote that for George R.R. Martin's anthology, Dangerous Women.
Oh, I've read that. I think you sent that to me at some point, Dusty. I'm pretty sure I've read that.
Yeah. Or I got it up from Central Rogues, maybe.
Oh, okay. I think I read that from my library. I must have then, because that's title sounds familiar. Yeah, so I remember that one.
It's a good anthology.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you wanted to say about this book that really caught your attention?
Yeah, we got so much into the Cosmere. I love that.
But that's what this book does. That's what this book does.
Yeah, man. It's so Cosmere. I love it. Yeah. I guess there isn't any other there aren't any other details that I can think of that we haven't covered. We've covered pretty much most of the main stuff. We could go on and on for hours about it, I'm sure, but I don't know, anything else that you guys can think of that we haven't covered?
Oh, Kelsier asked Sazed to make what's his name? No, he asked him to make Les Saban as a Mistborn, and he granted it, and he did it.
Right.
So it's like, man, what kind of pull does Kelsier have with the new most powerful god in the Cosmere?
Yeah.
I want to ask a question. What do you think is going to be Kelsier's ultimate fate as a character?
He's going to come back. I think he's coming back, because remember he asks him at the very end, where he asks him if he could basically give him another body, and Kelsier's like, he's still a bad liar.
Because Harmony's like, I don't think I could do that. And he's like, yeah, you clearly could. And we also know from some of the hints in book, well, both in
Bands of Mourning.
Bands of Mourning, and from hints in Rhythm of War, that Kelsier does figure out how to come back, and it seems to be that he used Hemalurgy and Spook to do it. So it's like, yeah, make Spook a Mistborn, then I'll use him to get myself back into a physical body. One of the things, because Kelsier notices when the Koloss die that they're humans. And he's like, oh yeah, we basically pin their souls into these bodies using spikes. So I think the Koloss gave him ideas that, then you can pin a soul to something with spikes. And I think that's what he's done. He's pinned his cognitive aspect into something that allows him to live. Now, all right, then, last point then. If he is coming back, is he coming back as a hero? Or is he lived
I don't know.
See himself become the villain?
Well, if he's an agent of preservation, there must have been something that has gone that is so bad that you got to tap Kelsier to come back. Because I know Marsh is also one of his agents as well. But so I don't know why he would need both of them.
You're talking Harmony, right? Not preservation.
Oh, yeah, Harmony. Yeah, Marsh is agent of Harmony, as is, I know, one of the, what do you want to call them? The
Khandra.
Khandras, yeah, I know they're kind of very closely connected to him as well.
But like one of the things is when he's talking about the Khandra say to Waxillium, we're his preservation, like we don't kill things. And like, well, what's Wax? Like, you're his ruin. You're the person he sends to shoot people. And if he had Kelsier, he probably wouldn't need Wax. I think Kelsier just can't be controlled. And I think that's good, right? I think there should be a character who can't be controlled. And
like a wild card.
But this is my bid. I think that Brandon is setting up Kelsier to be one of the big endgame villains.
That would be so cool.
We'll see.
I think that's one of the ways he's going to get around the trope of bringing back his favorite character. Is going to be, I brought him back. But instead of bringing him back as a good guy, I brought him back as, like, now he is not constrained by the Lord Ruler. He can be himself. And by the way, he was always a nasty guy. You were just okay with it because he was killing prickish nobles. Now he's killing you. How'd you like that?
Oh, that would be so cool. That would be so cool if he like becomes Ruin and he takes total control and defeats preservation, and then there has to be like this unimaginably high stakes cosmic struggle to defeat Ruin with the combination of like all the other gods from all the other planets or something like that.
Well, I'm up for it, man. I'm up for it. And like, who does he hate? He hates Hoyd, and Hoyd is the guy who's trying to solve the problem of the shards. Do you think that the entire Cosmere will end with all of the shards being one by one destroyed, and it's like last man standing, like Highlander style, or do you think it will be done with reunification?
I think they're going to all be scattered.
Yeah. I think it would be more interesting
if nobody had the power to hold those specifically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was gonna say the opposite. I was gonna say it would be really cool if it was about unification, but I could like with the way you explained it, I can see
though it could go back and repeat itself with the Adenalcium incident.
Yeah, it could.
That's true.
But also, I think Cephandrius is realizing that he should never have broken it in the first place. He became clever enough with his mates and powerful enough to kill God, and now he's like, we probably should have left God in place.
So you think he's trying to find out how to unite them or destroy them?
I think he is just trying to get rid of Odium, big style. But I think eventually Brandon...
Odium's the biggest threat right now.
And remember, he hated Odium when he was just a human. Like he hates him.
The vessel.
Yeah, but I genuinely think that Brandon one of the things that Brandon is trying to manifest in his writing is, I think Brandon himself genuinely believes that unity is an answer to the world, and I think he thinks that's timeless, and so I think in the end that is going to be an element of his end game. That's my bid. That's my guess from the books.
That would be
I've
cool.
read.
That would be cool. I would like that. I think it would be totally cool if it's the opposite too, like you described though, Dusty. I think it would be so
do you
interesting
think
either way.
Kelsir's gonna be the one searching for the infinite gauntlet, or
yeah, that's another thing I want to point out. I think there'll be no holder. And I think that's important. I think one of the things that they'll establish is actually this is too much for a human to have. If a human has it, even one that is as well-meaning as Sazed, it goes wrong. But like he has said, like I thought for a while that he might just make so much money that he'll be like, I'm just not ending this. because well, we've all seen it, right? Because like there's going to be a great push for him when he finishes, for him not to finish.
Oh yeah.
Well, he has all these other planets that he could talk about. The
thing is, and also Brandon is Brandon. He wants to finish at some point. He actually wants to write other stories. And I remember him saying in one of the interviews that one of his sad moments was when he realized that he was never going to write all the stories he can think of. Like, and he had to just accept it. Like, I'm going to die before I get to write everything I want to write.
That's cool, though. That's a good problem for a writer to have, I think.
But that's why he's had to discard some of the stories and gone, well, you know what? This just isn't going to fly. And
there's like so much stuff that he's like, there's so many different things that he's working on. Like, man, where's this book? Where's this book? Where's that book?
But
and then you got George R.R. Martin, which can't even like finish the one series that he's been working on. I'm gonna
do a prequel TV show of Game of Thrones now instead. Okay.
But one of the things that's interesting is Brandon is not only a good writer, he's good at the business of writing, as in like the mechanical side. And so if you look at what he's doing, he has done a YouTube channel now. He's engaging with, like, that's making him money. And so he's like making money by signing things in front of us and doing AMAs because it's done it by YouTube. He's on Twitch, but not only that, he's got his own store. He's making money selling leather bounds outside of his publishing house. But he's also diversified his publishers.
He's got a podcast.
He does, and he publishes his YA separate from his main stuff. So he's got a diversified portfolio, but also he's done something else that takes a lot of guts, which is he is beginning to collab. So in the Dark One, he didn't do the art. He didn't even do most of the lettering. He did the story concept, and he let someone else produce it with his name.
What is this? The Dark One?
It's the one where there's a kid who realizes that he's actually the Dark One. Instead of being the chosen one for good, he's the chosen one for evil. Okay. And it's how he runs his life, knowing that he is the main villain of the story. And it's a graphic novel.
Okay.
But also, like when he did White Sand, he didn't write all of the White Sand comic. He took.
Wasn't there that science fiction novella that he did with that other woman author too?
Yep. And that's just happened right now. So he wrote Skyward and Starsight, and he will write the other novels. But there's going to be 3/4 novellas that will be done from different characters' perspectives. She is writing all the prose. But what he's doing is he's doing the full story with her. They're agreeing all the story. Then she's writing it, and then he's doing a final pass on her writing.
Oh, it sounds like what Orson Scott Card is doing with Aaron Johnston with the Swarm. Yeah, like the second Formic War series.
Oh, he is? Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, because Orson Scott Card doesn't really write any of that. He just he's basically doing the same thing that Sanderson is doing there, where the IP is his, but he's letting somebody else write in that space.
That's cool. That's cool because that means like he can expand, like Orson Scott Card can expand the Enderverse even farther that way, and then Brandon Sanderson can expand his writing that much more in the same way.
And that's what I'm saying, that he has not only a good author head, he has a good business head. He realizes that by utilizing these other people to write the things that aren't the main novels, it gives him a chance to write the main novels. And and one of the things he says is he gets burnout. Like if he does like 4 Stormlights in a row, he would lose interest. So
yeah, that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of writing.
So in between a Stormlight year, he goes and writes other things. He writes a Mistborn, he writes a Starsight. And he says that gives him the energy. That's for him, that's rest. Other people rest by not writing. He rests by writing something different. And that gives him the rest he needs. Then he can come back to Stormlight. And
well, I want another Ritmatist. He needs to
write
another one of those.
He said because he promised that he will, but it's so far down the line. And
I want to see that alleged sequel to Warbreaker 2, Nightblood, from because Nightblood is one of my favorite characters in the Cosmere.
Nightblood has to happen. I think Cell 2 will happen. Nightblood will happen. Rithmetis 2, I don't know when he'll get to that. He's only going to do it because he promised it, and I don't think he'll ever promise again. Because
well, I like it, though. I actually like the Rithmetist.
I love it. No, but the only reason we don't already have it is because something happened that he could not have foreseen. How could he possibly have guessed that just before he finished the Rithmetist, he was going to get a call from Harriet saying, "Hey, do you want to finish the Wheel of Time?" He did not see that coming. And obviously, he dropped everything to do that, and it's a good thing for me. It was a great choice by her and by him, and it's made his career, but it's also helped the Wheel of Time have the ending it deserved, and it's amazing. Anyway, I think this book shows how clever Brandon is as a writer.
Yeah,
it shows that he has the big ideas, and he's writing a screenplay for Mistborn. He's
sweet.
He's diversifying. You want audiobook only, he's got it. You want graphic novel, you've got it. You want full novels, big, full, thick, chunky novels, you've got them. You want regular size novels, you got them. You want novellas, you got them. And that's what he is doing. He is creating the Cosmere, and he's giving us it in every different kind of media. And this is just begging to eventually become film or TV. And
or like video games too, I bet.
And when it does, that will throw him into a different stratosphere of what he can achieve, because it will open the mass public to his stuff.
Yeah, so much of the different powers, like in Mistborn and so many other stories, that would be so cool as a video games. Build your elementic powers. You could even have some sort of RPG in any of the different Cosmere worlds too.
You could even have a first-person team-based shooter.
Yep.
Yeah, you could.
Especially when
you could have some Western first-person shooter in Era 2 of Mistborn.
Steampunk, man, steampunk.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that I think Brandon is not only an authorial genius, I think he is also got a very, very good business head. And if you look at what he's done, he has recruited a team with whom he is sharing his success by employing them. And Isaac is his buddy from college who was good at art and now has a full-time job as his art director. He's thinking,
I love it when people do that. It reminds me of totally off topic, but Joe Rogan. That's why he's one of my favorite podcasts, because he's always having these totally unknown comedians, or just his friends who are comedians on his podcast, and then he massively boosts their audience and they start their own podcast and they become way more popular as comedians, and he starts the careers of so many people because he's well, I've got this power called fame. I'm going to share it with people and allow other people to pursue their creative interests that they want to do with their lives, which is awesome. I love it when artists do that.
Yeah. It costs me nothing to do it, but it gives you everything you need. before we go, I did find those quotes where he describes the shards. I put them.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
Can I read those?
Yeah, go ahead and read them.
I think these are amazing pieces of writing. So think about how you would try and describe a piece of a god. And he goes, so Kelsier looks into his eyes, into Ruin's eyes, and goes, this force was time infinite. It was the winds that weathered, the storms that broke, the timeless waves running slowly, slowly, slowly to a stop as the sun and the planet cooled to nothing. It was the ultimate end, the destiny of all things. And it was angry. I love that. Like Ruin,
beautiful writing.
It is beautiful writing. Like that idea of actually, you know what? In the end, our sun will grow cold, and this planet will be history, and that's that. And then preservation, the infinity of a note held perfectly, never wavering, the majesty of a painting frozen and still, capturing a slice of life from a time gone by. It was the power of many, many moments compressed somehow into one. Like the idea of, you take a picture, you draw a painting, and it just never moves. That's what preservation is all about. Beauty, but not beauty in motion, not beauty progressing, not science. Fixed moments that don't shift. And I just love that. I think it's cool. And the idea of self-realization. And I hope we get little paragraphs like that for all the shards. I'd love that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah. Cool. That's so great. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Also, I know you probably need to get to bed there soon, Tristram. Thanks for nerding out so much about this with us.
4 hours before I have to go to work.
Oh yeah. The nerddom is powerful. Yeah. Oh, this was so much fun. Okay, so for our next book club chat, I was thinking about whether we should do Era 2 of Mistborn next, or the standalones in the First Law series first, or we could talk about Arcanum Unbounded if you want. Which one of those would you guys want to do?
Well, you'd have to ask Tristram because he has to read those standalones. So
he hasn't read them.
I have to be frugal with my money, guys, but I will try and con my wife and see if she'll give me a book budget for Christmas. As my
dude, if you want, I have all the audio books, and I can send them to you if you want.
He can send them to you on Google Drive. He does that with me sometimes.
Okay.
What I do is I put all of my audiobooks on Drive because damn, do they take up so much space? So I just put them on the cloud.
But anyway, we should finish this cast. But if we do that, I will. If I've listened to them, I'll happily contribute. Or you guys can do it without me.
So which would you guys want to do next? What would you prefer, Tristram?
Well, I won't have read them anytime soon. So if we do sort of Emperor's Soul and the Forests of Hell next, I'm good for that.
Okay, yeah, we could do that. Does that sound good to you, Dusty?
Yeah, I'm down for some Arcanum Unbounded.
Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, we'll cover.
If you guys do stuff without me, and then I come back when you're done with the other sections. Don't be beholden to me.
Okay. Well, maybe we can. We'll talk about those short stories next time, and then go from there and decide whether we'll get into Era 2 first, or maybe do maybe just Dusty and I could do one of the standalones first, because I'm sure we'll talk about or we could wait until you read them too, because I'm sure we're gonna want to read them like 2 or 3 times or something too, but we can figure that out.
Your thoughts would be on Best Served Cold.
Yeah, I would too, actually. Yeah, maybe we should wait until you've read those, even if it takes a while.
Peace.
Well, the trouble with Peace is further out than you think, because you got 4 standalones before you even get to that.
Yeah, for sure.
I haven't even read The Trouble with Peace yet.
I haven't either. Is that his new trilogy?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't read that yet either. Yeah. Right, so let's talk about those short stories next time, and then maybe we should just get into Era 2 of Mistborn after that. I think that would be cool.
Okay.
If that's cool with you guys. Yeah.
And maybe you might need to revisit Elantris sometime soon.
We'll do that after Mistborn.
Yeah. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
By the way, once this should work for us really well, because by the time we've done the Abercrombie stuff and all of Mistborn 2, guess what? Mistborn 4 should be out. So
yeah, for sure.
We can
exactly.
We'll be topical finally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, looking forward to exploring the Cosmere more with you guys. And so yeah, and also of course next weekend, check out on Dusty's channel, Woke Centrist. We're going to talk about the very first episode of the Wheel of Time show. So fucking stoked about that.
Possibly second.
All right.
Okay.
It depends on how drawn in you guys get. If you get so drawn in that you've actually watched all three, we'll do all three. But whatever you guys do, let me know and we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Okay.
It depends how much I can persuade my wife to watch.
Right. I know it's a lot in a short time. I know I'm probably going to watch all three, knowing myself, but we can at least talk about the first episode if that's as far as you guys can get.
Cool, man. Okay. All right. And next weekend, Dusty, do you want me to double check to see if Parker can talk about Dune Messiah?
You can check, but it's going to be a while before my library gets me Dune Messiah again. So I'd be talking like purely by memory. And to be honest, Dune Messiah is probably my least favorite Dune book.
It probably is mine too.
So I don't remember a whole lot of it. We could, but my review would basically be listening to a Legendarium episode because I don't have that audiobook in my vast library of audiobooks.
Okay. I haven't finished Squid Game yet. So maybe we should Sorry?
For your channel?
Yeah. I've still got 3 more episodes.
Okay.
So yeah, maybe we should just talk about Dune Messiah then, and maybe just Parker and I could do it, or you could.
I can jump on.
You could jog your memory with those You could jog your memory with those Legendarium episodes. I'm sure there would be enough to talk about. So yeah, let's do that if that's cool.
Sure. Yeah. Just let me know when you want to set that up.
All right. Cool. Yeah, so check out that hopefully next weekend. Check out Wheel of Time on Dusty's channel, Woke Centrist, and we'll ideally talk about Dune Messiah, the second Dune book, on my channel, Mindgasms here. Thanks again for nerding out with me, guys, and next time our nerd session will be on the short stories Emperor's Soul and Shadows for Silence in the Forests of Hell from the Arcanum Unbounded short stories collection. And thanks again, everyone, for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified when we come out with more videos. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And read lots and lots and lots of Brandon Sanderson books and nerd out about the Cosmere. It's awesome. Oh yeah, and check out my Patreon too. It's in the link of the description of the video. And thanks again for joining, guys, and thanks again everyone for watching, and adios until next time.
All right, sayonara, Pete.